How the Sea Began, a Taino myth retold and illustrated by Goerge Crespo. In the beginning, before the land was surrounded by the sea, in a place called Suania, there were 4 great mountains. One mountain was called Borinquen, land of the brave. And on that mountain, in the village of Coabey, lived an old man named Yaya, with his wife Itiba and their only son, Yayael. Yayael was a skilled hunter. Yayael hunted with a bow that his father had carved for him out of tabanuco wood. It is said that tabanuco tree is the home of spirits and that its wood holds magical powers. This saying may be true because when Yayael went out hunting, he always brought back game. The people of Coabey ate well, even when the other hunters came back empty-handed. Yayael did not. One day, while Yayael was out hunting, he saw the sky was darkening in the east. A flock of swallows flying before the lowering clouds circled around his head, flapping and beating their wings. Yayael knew this was a warning that Guavanse, the terrible goddess of hurricanes, was coming. He quickly hid his bow and arrows under a large rock and ran toward the village, hoping to reach safety before the winds overtook him. Guavanse created a hurricane that struck with tremendous force. The winds howled and raged for hours. The villagers who had been working in their fields sought shelter in a cave nearby. Yaya and Itiba prayed for the supreme god of Yukahu that Yayael would come through the storm unharmed. When the winds died down, the people thanked Yukahu, then ventured from the cave. They found that their huts had been flattened by the storm. Yaya and Itiba waited, but Yayael did not appear. Yaya went to search for his son. He found the bow and arrow where Yayael had hid them, but Yayael himself there was no sign. When Itiba saw her husband returning with their son's bow and arrows in his hands, she called out Yayael's name. Then she fell down weeping at her husband's feet. Yaya reverently placed Yayael's bows and arrows in a large gourd. Then he sat down beside his wife and wept too. The villagers helped one another rebuild their homes. When the time of grieving was over, they helped Yaya and Itiba hang the gourd from the ceiling of their huts, where the bow and arrow would be safe, just in case Yaya's spirit would wish to return and visit them. Yaya picked up his own bow and arrows and went to hunt, for now the village could no longer depend on Yayael to bring home meat. And this is the gourd that hang from the ceiling. And often Tainos hung the bones of their ancestors on a gourd from the ceilings. Though the men of the village hunted every day, they seldom brought home enough for everyone. They were hungry. Even the children, who were always fed first, were becoming thin and sickly. One evening, Yaya asked Itiba to lower the gourd that held Yaya's weapons. "I want to see our son's bow," he said. "Perhaps it still holds the power of the tabanuco." As Itiba lowered the gourd on the floor, it tipped just a little. Out spilled out many beautiful plump fish. Yaya and Itiba were astonished. They had never seen such fish, large and silvery and still breathing, and as if freshly taken from the water. Itiba cooked them and invited the whole village to share the meal. The villagers rejoiced in their fortune. They sang, Pahari, Yayael, we honor you, and went to bed with full stomachs. The following day, all the villagers went out to work in the fields. They left 4 boys to guard the gourd they held, Yayael's bow and arrows, the bows and arrows that turned into fish. The boys were curious and hungry. The higher the sun climbed into the sky, the more curious and hungry they became. One boy stood up on the tiptoe and tried to peer into the gourd. Then a second boy tried to climb up inside. They were joined by the other 2, who together they brought down the gourd on the floor. Out flopped 4 fish, just the right size for 4 hungry boys. As the boys cooked the fish and ate them, then they ate 4 more. They sang praises to Yaya's spirit and lowered the gourd again for 4 more fish. Suddenly, the boys heard Yaya and the villagers returning from the fields. Afraid of being caught, they hurried to raise the gourd back to the ceiling. In their haste, they fell, and they failed to secure the rope that held the gourd in its place. The gourd fell to the ground and broke open. Water rushed out of the broken gourd, and in an instant everything in the hut was afloat. A wave swept the boys out of the hut and out of the village and left them choking and sputtering in the path that led to the fields, where Yaya and the other villagers found them. The water tasted of salt, and the boys said, like the salt of tears. Water continued to flow from the gourd. It flowed and rose to cover the land, and fish swam out of the gourd, large fish and small fish, starfish, urchins, and jellyfish. All kinds of sea creatures came out of the gourd to fill the water with life. The villagers gathered on the mountaintop and watched as the water covered Zoania. When the last of the water stopped rising, they saw that their mountain Borinquen was now an island. They gave their thanks to Yucca, who dressed themselves festively and celebrated with music and dancing, because as long as there were fish in the sea, they would not go hungry. And this is one story of how the sea began. The end.